They told me to behave, to smile, to sit through my sister's big day like I wasn't the family secret they were ashamed of. But when I saw my name spelled wrong on the place card shoved next to the kitchen doors, something broke, and when they handed me the mic for a toast, I didn't say a word. I tapped the screen and let the groom destroy the fantasy they built. I was halfway through drafting a memo when my phone lit up with an incoming call from my father. I stared at the screen for a full 5 seconds before I silenced it and flipped the phone over. A minute later, it buzzed again. This time, it was my mother. I hadn't heard from either of them in nearly 3 years, not since I left Tacoma for good. Any communication since then had been minimal and strictly through email. Short, cold, transactional. Like asking if I'd received a holiday card or sending me an address update for a tax form. Never anything personal. Never anything close to warmth. Now both of them were calling back to back. That alone made my stomach twist. I let the second call go to voicemail. Not even 2 minutes later, they called again. But this time on FaceTime. I don't know what possessed me, but I picked up. My father's face filled the screen first. Gray at the temples, now still sharp in the eyes, still always watching. My mother's voice came in before I could speak. Lena, your sister's wedding is next month. You need to be here. No, hello. No, how are you? Just straight to it. I blinked. The screen tilted as they sat side by side, probably in the living room where I used to spend hours pretending not to exist. We've sent you the formal invitation, my mother said. I hope you've received it. I hadn't, or maybe I had and trashed it without looking. I didn't remember. She continued without waiting. Sabrina's day is going to be very special. The press will be there. We're announcing the new partnership with the Caldwell family, and it would look incredibly strange if her sister wasn't there to support her. Support her. Right. Richard leaned forward, now adjusting the camera slightly. Lena, I know there's been tension. But this is not about the past, this is about family. I felt a tightness build in my chest. 3 years. 3 years of silence and distance. They hadn't asked where I'd gone when I left. They hadn't come after me. But now that Sabrina was having her picture-perfect wedding, I was suddenly part of the narrative again. Lena dear, this is important, my mother said with a tone that grated against me like sandpaper. Sabrina deserves to be celebrated, and the family deserves to be seen as whole. There it was. Not even a well-disguised attempt. Not we want you there because we love you. Not we miss you. Just we need you for the image. She tilted her head, waiting. I realized they were expecting a response. I pressed my lips together, fighting to keep my voice steady. I don't know if I can take time off. Work is heavy right now. My father scoffed lightly. Surely your boss can spare you for one weekend. This is your sister's wedding, not a trip to the grocery store. I looked at their faces, the same faces that used to watch me slip out of the room unnoticed. The same faces that used to light up for Sabrina's every accomplishment, every tantrum, every self-centered demand. I said I'd think about it, that I'd look into flights. And then I hung up. I sat there staring at the dark screen of my phone. My hands had gone cold. They wanted me back for one day. One carefully staged family photograph. One perfectly cropped headline. 3 years of being invisible. And now I was needed to complete the backdrop. I set the phone down and walked to the kitchen. Poured myself a glass of water, stared at the sink. My mind was a flood of memories. Sabrina's sweet 16 party. I wasn't in a single photo. Senior night at my high school debate finals. They left early to attend her cheerleading banquet. The time I got my first full-time job and no one asked what I did. I pressed my fingers to my temples. They had chosen her a long time ago. And now they wanted to pretend like I'd always been part of it. Outside, the Seattle sky was thick with early evening gray. I stood at the window and watched the wind tug at the trees. I hadn't made a decision yet, but I knew I couldn't ignore the past just because they needed a matching set for the pictures. And deep down, I knew this wasn't going to be just a wedding. Something about the urgency in their voices, the pressure in my mother's smile felt off. Like I wasn't being invited, I was being positioned. I walked back to the table and sat down staring at the memo I had abandoned. My cursor blinked on the screen. The words didn't come. Instead, I opened my laptop calendar. I scrolled to June. The week was wide open. I closed the calendar, and I opened the email I'd promised myself I'd never respond to. The one from Sabrina. Sent 2 weeks ago. Subject line, big day coming. No body text. Just an attachment with her wedding website, a picture of her in a white dress, and a tagline. Sabrina Whitmore and Grant Caldwell, the 15th of June 2025. Loveworth Building. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. Loveworth Building. The irony almost made me laugh. I closed the email and leaned back in my chair, letting my eyes drift to the framed photo on my bookshelf. It was the only one I kept from college graduation. Just me in my cap and gown standing in front of the campus fountain smiling into a camera I had asked a stranger to hold. No family, no flowers, no celebration dinner afterward. Just that photo and the faint memory of walking across the stage while the audience clapped for the girl 2 names after mine. When I was younger, I used to believe the camera didn't like me. In every photo we took as a family, my face was either blurred, blocked, or conveniently cropped out. Birthdays, holidays, school events. Sabrina always in the middle, bright, confident, framed by our parents' arms. Me somewhere off to the side, eyes half-closed, smile fading. There was one time it really hit me. My high school graduation. I had been so proud that day. I had finished as class valedictorian, the first in our family to earn a scholarship to a top-tier university. I had stayed up nights rehearsing my speech even though no one at home ever asked to hear it. The ceremony was long and hot, held outside on the football field. I spotted my dad in the crowd wearing sunglasses and looking bored. My mom was fanning herself with the program more focused on the woman next to her than what was happening on stage. Sabrina wasn't there. She had a regional art competition the same day. I remember the moment I stepped off the stage with my diploma in hand, looking into the stands, searching for their faces. I couldn't tell if they saw me. Later that evening, my mom asked me to take off the gown so she could wash it for a neighbor's daughter. She said the fabric wrinkled easily and would be better stored clean. I handed it over without saying a word. The next morning, I found a fresh picture frame on the living room shelf. Inside, it was a colored pencil drawing of a cat with a crooked tail, one green eye and one blue. Sabrina's entry from the art show. Not a single photo from graduation had been printed. Not one. When I asked about it, my mother said we hadn't gotten any good shots of me. The light was bad. I looked too serious. Besides, she added, art is timeless. It brings color into the home. Diplomas sit in drawers. That was the first time I realized I might not be part of the narrative they were building. At first, I tried harder. I volunteered for things. I joined clubs. I brought home trophies, plaques, certificates. None of it made it to the walls. But Sabrina's messy sketches were everywhere. Every corner of the house had her handwriting, her signature, swirls, her lopsided drawings of girls with giant eyes and crooked crowns. I even started wondering if I was actually that boring. Maybe I didn't deserve the attention. Maybe she was the spark in the family, and I was the supporting character. The quiet one. The filler. But then came the Christmas card incident. I had just finished my freshman year at UC Berkeley. I flew home for the holidays, exhausted but excited. I had made the dean's list, gotten a summer internship lined up, even brought a few gifts I'd bought with the little money I had saved working part-time. When the family holiday card arrived a week later, I wasn't in it. They had taken the photo at Sabrina's school's winter art exhibit. It was her and our parents standing next to a painting she had done of a girl dancing in a snowstorm. The caption read, "Celebrating talent, love, and family." I was sitting right there when they opened the envelope and no one said a word. That evening I went up to the attic and opened a box marked Lena's stuff. inside were old birthday cards, a few school awards, and a handful of photographs. One of them showed me at 8 years old blowing out candles alone at the kitchen table. A paper plate and a cupcake. I was wearing a party hat with no one else in the frame. I remember that moment so clearly. It was the year Sabrina had pneumonia and Mom said we couldn't have people over. But she still baked a cake for Sabrina 3 months later when she was better and threw a belated party with 20 kids in the backyard. The memories kept piling up. The time I sprained my wrist at track practice and Mom told me to walk home so she could finish watching Sabrina's rehearsal. The time I got cast in the school play and no one showed up. The time I wore a new dress to my junior prom and Dad told me I looked like I was trying too hard. I guess that's what it feels like to grow up as background. Now with this wedding looming, they wanted me in the picture again. Not because I mattered, but because it would look better if I stood there smiling next to Sabrina in her $1,000 gown. Because people would ask questions if the older sister didn't show. They didn't care about my presence. They cared about the symmetry. I stood up from the table and walked to the mirror by the door. My reflection stared back, older now, sharper, tired, but not broken. I wasn't 18 anymore, waiting to be noticed. I had built a life, even if no one back home knew about it. A life of deadlines and quiet victories. Of real friends and chosen family. Still, part of me ached. Not for their approval, but for what could have been. For the version of my life where I was enough simply for existing. The ache didn't last long. Years of silence had built a callus. It pressed now like a bruise beneath the skin, dull but there. I turned off the lights, left the empty glass in the sink, and climbed into bed without checking my phone. Let them wait. The apartment was quiet except for the low hum of the fridge and the distant sound of rain tapping against the kitchen window. I moved slowly barefoot across the hardwood floor, each step softened by the old throw rug that curled slightly at the edges. Something in my chest felt heavy, like the air had thickened since that call. I didn't want to sit. I didn't want to lie down. So I opened the drawer. It was the one beneath the small bookshelf in the corner of my living room, tucked between a stack of faded legal briefs and a half-used notepad from law school. I hadn't opened it in a while. I knew what was in there. My hands didn't shake, but my breath caught when I reached for the envelope. Cream-colored, soft to the touch, the handwriting on the front still as graceful as I remembered. Lena in cursive blue ink. The E looped wide just like she used to teach me when I was 6, and still believed cursive was some kind of secret code for grown-ups. I slid the letter out slowly. The paper was worn from the fold, but the scent of her lavender hand cream still lingered faintly, like she had written it just yesterday. I sat down on the floor cross-legged and read it for what must have been the 100th time. You do not have to prove anything to people who never bothered to see you. Live your life not for them to understand, but for you to feel free. You are enough as you are. I could still hear her voice when I read those words. Eleanor, my grandmother. The only person who ever truly knew me. She had come to live with me the last year of her life after the diagnosis had made it impossible for her to stay in that old house in Bainbridge Island on her own. I was working full-time, juggling cases, driving her to appointments, cooking meals she barely touched. But she smiled every day. Even when the pain crept into her bones and made her wince as I helped her into bed. I used to sit beside her at night listening to her stories. Not the ones she told at family dinners, not the polite ones about bridge club or her peach cobbler. These were the ones she had locked away. About running barefoot through the garden after rainstorms. About the first time she said no to her father and meant it. About how she fell in love with my grandfather during the war, even though he left before she could say yes. About how sometimes surviving was the boldest act a woman could choose, and she listened to me. Really listened. She was the first person who didn't change the subject when I spoke about work, who didn't pretend to yawn when I brought home my research or stayed up late reviewing court filings. She'd ask questions, real ones. She wanted to know what made me tick, what drove me. She didn't once compare me to Sabrina. That final night she was lucid. Clearer than she had been in weeks. She took my hand and said, "Don't wait for them to love you the way you deserve. That's a ship that never left the harbor. But you, my girl, you can sail anywhere." The morning after she passed the house felt cold, not physically, but in a way that scraped at your ribs from the inside. I remember how I called Mom, voice trembling, telling her the time and asking if she needed help getting to the memorial. She said she'd think about it. Sabrina didn't respond to the email at all. 2 days later, I saw pictures on her social feed. Her in Tulum on a boat with some guy I'd never seen before, holding a margarita the size of her face, captioned something like, "Heaven can wait." I never forgot that. Never will. At the funeral, it was just me and a few of Eleanor's friends from church. A pastor who mispronounced her middle name. A florist who delivered the wrong bouquet. Still, it was peaceful. I read the eulogy myself. No tears came that day, not until I got home. I collapsed onto the couch and cried until my lungs hurt. And Mom. She sent a card. A generic sympathy card. Inside it said, "Hope you're taking care of yourself." Signed, Marianne. Not Mom. Just Marianne. I tucked the letter back into the envelope carefully and returned it to the drawer. My fingers paused as they brushed over the old photograph next to it. Eleanor and me in her garden, sunflowers behind us, both of us laughing, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. There were no frames like that in my mother's house, none where I looked like I belonged. I stood up, exhaling slowly, trying to steady the storm inside me. I owed Eleanor more than just a memory. I owed her the promise I never said aloud. That I would not keep circling the same old ache. That I would not let them decide who I became. Maybe showing up to the wedding wasn't about them. Maybe it was about me. About saying goodbye properly. Not to Eleanor. I had done that. But to the fantasy that one day they'd turn around and see me. I picked up the letter one more time just to feel its weight. Then I whispered, "I miss you, Grandma." And for the first time in months, the apartment didn't feel quite so cold. The email landed in my inbox late on a Thursday night, subject line, "You might want to see this." It was from Jessica Chen, my college roommate from Columbia. We hadn't spoken in years aside from the occasional like on each other's holiday posts. Seeing her name made my heart lurch with something between surprise and dread. There was no message in the body, just a single video attachment. I hesitated before clicking. My hand hovered over the mouse. Something inside me whispered this would change everything. The video opened to a dimly lit room, loud music, and the sound of glass clinking. At first it was hard to make out what was happening. Men were laughing, joking, shouting over each other. Then the camera panned to Grant. He was shirtless, flushed from alcohol, holding a bottle of whiskey in one hand, swaying slightly as he leaned toward the camera. A voice off-screen asked him something I couldn't hear, and Grant grinned like the world belonged to him. I'll never forget his words. "Marrying that girl gets me 25% of the company easy. That's the only reason I put a ring on it." He laughed. After the wedding, I go back to the one I really love. Sabrina's just a transaction. Laughter erupted around him. Someone high-fived him. I closed the laptop so fast it snapped shut like a mousetrap. My breath came short. My hands were shaking. I felt sick. The kind of betrayal I'd always suspected but never quite proven was now staring me in the face. And not just betrayal of Sabrina. This was a calculated, shameless exploitation of our family's business, our legacy, our lives. I paced my living room in silence, then opened the window for air. I wanted to scream. To call Sabrina and tell her right that second. To drive across town and show up at her door with the laptop in hand. But I didn't. I sat back down and opened the laptop again. I watched the video twice more, then saved it in 3 different folders and backed it up on a hard drive. Then I called Jessica. She picked up on the 3rd ring. "Hey Lena, I wasn't sure if I should send that. I recognized him and remembered your last name and... Where was this taken? At some hotel suite in Scottsdale. My friend's fiancé is friends with one of those guys." She was showing me clips from the party, and when I saw him say that, I knew it wasn't right. I swallowed hard. Did you send it to anyone else's number? Just you. I figured if you wanted to tell your sister, that should come from you. But Lena, be careful. Thank you, Jess. Really. We said goodbye, but I didn't hang up immediately. I stared at my reflection in the black screen. For once I saw something cold and focused in my own eyes. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I sat at my kitchen counter with a legal pad and started making a list. 1. Keep the video secure. 2. Research potential implications, corporate fraud, prenup, breach. 3. Check Sabrina's wedding date. Time frame to act. 4. Call Malcolm. My hand paused at that one. Malcolm Foster had been my father's closest friend before Dad passed. He was a semi-retired attorney now, but he'd always had a sharp mind and an even sharper sense of ethics. I hadn't spoken to him since the reading of Dad's will. Back then, he was the only one who looked at me like I still belonged in the room. I picked up the phone, but didn't dial. Not yet. Instead, I replayed the video in my mind. Grant's smug face. The way he leaned into the lie like it was second nature. I wondered if Sabrina had any idea, or if she was too lost in the glitter of it all to see the cracks forming beneath her heels. Later that afternoon, I went out for a walk around Capitol Hill to clear my head. The air was crisp and cool, the kind of spring day that tricks you into thinking everything's fine. People were walking dogs, sipping lattes, pushing strollers. Meanwhile, I had a time bomb in my hard drive and a sister about to walk into a marriage built on lies. I sat on a bench and watched 2 little kids chase each other with bubbles, their laughter rising over the breeze. Part of me still wrestled with it. Would telling her make me the villain? Would it look like bitterness? But this wasn't just family drama anymore. This was calculated deception, and it wasn't just Sabrina who'd be affected. The family business, our grandfather's legacy, was on the line. By the time I got home, I had made one decision. I wasn't going to act on emotion. Not yet. I wasn't going to confront Sabrina. Not until I had legal clarity. Not until I knew how deep Grant's intentions went. Not until I understood exactly how much was at stake. I emailed Malcolm. Subject line, need to discuss something. Urgent but confidential. In the body, I simply wrote, "Hi Malcolm, I hope you're well. I have something I need to talk to you about, and I would appreciate your guidance. It's about my sister's upcoming wedding and a potential legal concern that might impact the family. Let me know if you're available for coffee or a call this week. Best Lena." I hit send and sat back. The silence in the apartment returned heavier this time. Not cold, just waiting. I stood at the window for a long time, staring out at the streetlights casting their yellow halos on the wet pavement. My phone lay face down on the counter behind me, but I could still feel it there, like it was burning a hole through the granite with that damn video trapped inside. It was almost midnight, but I didn't feel like sleeping. I made a cup of tea I wouldn't drink and sat on the edge of the couch, just breathing, thinking, trying not to drown. And that's when the memory came back. Not gently, not as a whisper. It hit me like a door slamming open in a dark hallway. I was 23. Just a few years out of college, working at a nonprofit downtown, barely making rent, but feeling hopeful for the first time in a long while. His name was Aiden. He was a law student doing a summer internship with a firm in Boston. We met at a community fundraiser. He was charming in a quiet way, all soft smiles and sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, he always looked you in the eye. It felt safe, easy, like I could finally stop bracing for the next storm. I introduced him to my family after 3 months. It was supposed to be a Sunday dinner. Dad grilled steaks. Mom made her over-salted mashed potatoes. Sabrina showed up in a backless dress and heels too high for the grass, late as usual, breezing in with her hair perfect and her voice loud enough to pull every orbit toward her. She was 20, then freshly dropped out of school for the second time, full of plans and disasters. Aiden was polite. I saw him smile at her once, then look back at me as if to reassure me that I had nothing to worry about. 2 weeks later, I came home to find him packing his things. He couldn't even look me in the eye. I remember his voice shaking. He said something about chemistry and confusion and needing to be honest. Then he walked out of my apartment and right into hers. I found out through Sabrina's Instagram where she posted a photo of their hands intertwined over coffee. The caption was a quote about fate. I didn't even cry at first. I felt hollow, like someone had reached inside me and scooped everything out. I confronted her once. I was still shaking with disbelief with the rawness of it all. She looked at me like I was being dramatic. "You can't steal what isn't yours to begin with," she said. "Maybe you should learn how to keep a man." I told Mom. I needed her to say it was wrong. I needed someone to say I wasn't crazy for feeling betrayed. Instead, she sighed and told me not to make things worse between us. "Sabrina's young," she said. "She doesn't always think things through. You're the older one. Be the bigger person." It wasn't just dismissal. It was a slap I couldn't unsee. That moment carved something deep into me. Not just pain, a realization. I wasn't just forgotten in my family. I was disposable. That year I moved to a smaller apartment, declined family invites, blocked Sabrina's number, and started building a life where I could breathe without waiting to be replaced. I told myself I'd moved on, that it didn't define me. But the truth was I carried that crack inside me ever since. And now, years later, here she was again, about to marry a man who saw her as nothing more than a key to a vault. And there I was again, holding the truth, watching the fire start, wondering if I should let it burn. The part that twisted the knife wasn't just the betrayal, it was how familiar it felt. I picked up my phone and played the video again, this time with the volume up. Grant's voice was slurred but smug. He talked about the shares, about getting them after the wedding, about not having to deal with her once things were secure. One of his friends whistled. Another made a joke about prenups and blondes. Laughter. Clinking glasses. A toast to deception. I paused the clip and stared at the screen. I could send it to her. I could end it all tonight. But what would that make me? Vengeful, vindicated? Did I want to protect her, hurt her, warn her? Or was this finally my chance to choose myself? I set the phone down and walked to the kitchen sink. Ran cold water over my hands. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened window. Not crying. Not angry. Just clear. They had always chosen her. Protected her. Excused her. But they had never asked what it cost me. Not once. And now, for the first time, I was holding the truth. Not because I wanted to destroy anyone, but because I finally understood something no one had ever told me. Sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to stop handing people the knife. The apartment stayed quiet. My tea had gone cold. I didn't move to reheat it. Instead, I reached for my laptop and opened a new folder. I named it Just in Case. Richard texted me on a Wednesday just after lunch, asking if I'd meet him for dinner. Not at the house, somewhere neutral. He suggested a steakhouse in Bellevue, one of those dark wood and leather banquet places where the waiters remembered your name and your drink order. I said yes because I already knew what he wanted. When I arrived, he was already seated, wine glass half full, smiling like we were old friends catching up. He stood to hug me and called me kiddo. It was the same tone he used when I was 16, and he let Sabrina take the car I had just washed and waxed. Like everything could be smoothed over with a wink and a shrug. I sat down across from him, ordered water, and waited. He didn't waste time. "Look, Lena, I know there's been tension between you and Sabrina and the family. I get it. I really do." He sipped his wine and leaned in. "But this weekend's about joy. It's about moving forward. You showing up means a lot, but stirring up old stuff, that's not helpful, especially not now." I didn't say anything. He went on. "Whatever happened in the past, I'm sure it felt big to you. But we've all grown. We're all different people now." I wanted to laugh. Different Sabrina still lied like she breathed. My parents still silenced me with smiles. And Richard. He was still here asking me to put my pain in a box and bury it 6 feet under the rehearsal dinner. He looked at me kindly like he was doing me a favor. Please don't ruin this for her. For everyone. I'm asking you as your brother. I nodded once and said I'd think about it. He smiled again, called for the check, and offered to pay for my valet. I walked back to my car alone. The next morning, I drove back to Tacoma. The air there always felt heavier, like the town was holding its breath. My father greeted me in the driveway wearing the same navy windbreaker he wore to every soccer game when I was in 8th grade. "You're early," he said, and gave me a one-armed hug. "Your mom's at the florist." I followed him inside. The house smelled like lemon polish and anxiety. He poured me coffee without asking and motioned for me to sit at the kitchen table. We sat there facing each other, the silence filling the space like fog. "I know this visit isn't easy," he started, "but I'm glad you came. It's important for the family to have you here." I sipped the coffee. It was bitter. He clasped his hands. "Lena, I know you've been hurt. I know things weren't always fair, but holding on to that pain, it only makes things worse. This wedding. Maybe it's a chance to let go." I looked at him. He wasn't angry. He wasn't pleading. He was presenting an idea gently, like handing me a glass figurine and hoping I wouldn't smash it. "Let go," I repeated. "Yes, your mom. She worries. She thinks you're still angry. But maybe if you just show her you've moved on, things can finally settle." He smiled like that was reasonable. Like I hadn't swallowed a decade of silence just to be allowed back inside this kitchen. "She asked me to come back because she's worried about how it will look if I don't," I said. "Not because she misses me. Not because she thinks she was wrong." He didn't deny it. "We all have our ways of coping," he said softly. "Sometimes silence is what keeps a family together." I stared at the table. The grooves in the wood. The way the light hit his wedding ring. The fact that this was the closest thing I'd ever gotten to an apology. I didn't answer. That night, my mother came home and greeted me like I was a polite guest. She didn't hug me. She complimented my shoes. Later, while we were folding linens together in the living room, she said it. "I'm glad you're here. Just be mindful of your tone. This is Sabrina's weekend. It's not about the past." I didn't say anything. She looked at me, eyes soft but firm. Keeping quiet is sometimes the kindest thing you can do for a family. I folded a napkin perfectly in half, then again into a triangle. The next morning, I watched her fuss over the seating chart and rehearse her speech, which started with how blessed they were and ended with a toast to Sabrina and Mitchell's future. No mention of the daughter who once rewrote her college application essay 6 times just for a pat on the back that never came. But I smiled and nodded when she looked my way. That night in the guest room, I opened my laptop and reviewed the files again. I replayed the clip of Sabrina telling a florist that her sister was unpredictable and might cause drama, so keep her flowers neutral. I uploaded another file to the folder, labeled it rehearsal audio. Then I shut the lid and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. I didn't know exactly what I would do yet, but I was done being quiet. The door to Harold's office was always slightly ajar, like he expected me even when I hadn't called ahead. That morning, I didn't need an invitation. I walked in and found him standing at the window, a mug of coffee in his hand, watching the Puget Sound shimmer in the mid-morning light. He didn't turn around. I closed the door softly behind me and said, "I think I'm going to do it." Harold's voice came quiet, steady. "Sit down, Lena." I did. The leather chair creaked under me like it always did. Familiar, safe. He finally faced me. His expression was unreadable except for the slight crease between his brows. "Tell me why." I opened my laptop and tilted the screen toward him. The still frame of the video rested there, paused mid-frame. Sabrina laughing. My mother brushing a strand of hair from her shoulder. Richard raising a glass. I didn't press play. Instead, I said, because I've lived my entire life biting my tongue to keep everyone else comfortable. And for what? They're about to walk Sabrina down an aisle paid for with lies. Lies that buried me. Lies that cost me years. I want it all out. The fake trust. The hidden accounts. The manipulation. He nodded slowly, lowering himself into the chair opposite me. I watched him think. He always did that before speaking, never rushed. When he finally said something, it wasn't what I expected. If you release this, be ready for the fallout. There's no going back to Sunday dinners and polite small talk. You won't just be airing their secrets, Lena. You'll be ending the version of your family that still lives in memory. I stared down at my hands. My nails were short, clean. The polish chipped. I used to care about that sort of thing. About appearances. About being the good sister who always showed up but never said too much. I whispered, "There's nothing left of that version, Harold." He looked at me softer now. "I know. But even when we're ready to burn the house down, it's okay to mourn the rooms we once called home." His words hit something I didn't realize was still sore. I said I'm not doing this for revenge. Then why I hesitated. Because I can't keep pretending that silence is kindness. Because Sabrina got ahead by stepping on me. Because my parents care more about the neighbors' opinions than my life. And because maybe if I say something, someone else will stop swallowing their truth just to be loved. He nodded again. This time with something like approval. "I won't stop you. But I'll say this. Make sure you're doing it for the person you are becoming. Not the girl still trying to reclaim what she lost." I felt my throat tighten. Harold always saw right through me. I stood and paced to the bookshelf, dragging my finger along the spines. Old casebooks, ethics codes, photos of him with judges and students from past decades. I asked, "Did you ever have a moment where you thought, this is it, this is who I am now?" He chuckled low. "Once. I was defending a woman whose husband tried to have her declared mentally unfit just to steal her inheritance. The courtroom was cold. I remember holding a file so tight my knuckles turned white. And when I spoke, I stopped caring what anyone thought. That was the moment. The fear didn't disappear, but it didn't lead anymore. I smiled. That's what I want. For the fear to stop driving the car. Then take the keys back, Lena." He stood and reached for his briefcase, then paused. "One more thing. If you go public, do it clean. No shouting. No pettiness. Let the evidence speak. Let the truth be the loudest thing in the room." I nodded, absorbing the weight of that. Before I left, he placed a hand on my shoulder. "You've always had a sharp mind, but this will take your whole heart too." Outside, the sky had turned a pale blue, crisp and cold. The city buzzed as usual, but everything around me felt like it had slowed, as if my body was catching up to what my soul already knew. I walked past a bakery where my mom used to take us after church. The smell of sugar and cinnamon hit me unexpectedly, and I stopped in front of the window. Two little girls sat inside sharing a cookie. One had frosting on her nose. I couldn't remember the last time Sabrina and I had shared anything that sweet or innocent. I kept walking. When I got home, I sat at my desk and opened the draft email titled just in case. I reread every line, checked the attachments, financial records, screenshots, the video file, a statement of facts with timestamps. Then I moved the cursor to the subject line and typed for the record. I didn't send it. Not yet. But I closed the lid of my laptop and felt something shift. It wasn't peace. Not exactly. It was the beginning of the end of pretending. And I was ready for it. The rehearsal dinner was held at a vineyard in Napa, the kind of place with fairy lights strung over aged oak barrels and servers who only spoke in hushed tones. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden tint across the long white tables dressed in lavender linens. I arrived alone, wearing a simple dark green dress that hugged my figure but didn't scream for attention. It didn't matter. No one looked at me. A server led me to a table near the back farthest from the head table where Sabrina sat flanked by her fiancé and our parents. A small folded card marked my place. Lena. 2S. I stared at it for a second too long, then picked it up and placed it flat under my water glass. I sat beside a woman named Trish, one of Sabrina's coworkers from the fashion house in New York. She glanced at me with polite confusion, clearly unsure who I was or why I was there. I didn't offer an introduction. She didn't ask. We ate in silence. Sabrina never once looked in my direction. When the servers brought out the champagne for toasts, she clinked her glass to our parents laughing, whispering something into Jason's ear that made him smirk. I caught my father scanning the room. His eyes swept past me like I was a coat rack in a hotel lobby. He raised his glass to someone behind me. Dinner was plated lamb with fig reduction and truffle potatoes. I took 2 bites. It tasted like paper. No one asked me what I was doing these days. No one asked where I lived, who I'd brought, or if I was happy. It was as though I'd arrived from a different orbit, briefly colliding with theirs before drifting out of frame again. I had expected the coldness, but not the precision of it. Not the way it had been choreographed like everything else about this weekend. I excused myself before dessert and wandered toward the vineyards. Rows of grapevines stretched into the hills, the leaves flickering under garden lights. It was quiet there until the gravel behind me crunched with approaching steps. I didn't need to turn to know it was her. My mother stood beside me, arms crossed, lips pursed as if even this air displeased her. She looked out toward the hills and said softly, almost sweetly, Lena, I know you're hurt, but tomorrow is a big day. For all of us. I didn't answer. The silence between us wasn't new. It had aged, settled, grown thick like dust. She added, I know sisters have their jealousies. That's natural. But when the guests arrive, sisters stand together. That's how people see a strong family. I turned to her slowly, my voice calm. So this is about optics. It's about unity, she said quickly as if correcting herself. Sabrina's worked so hard to rebuild what happened with the press. This wedding is her fresh start. And for us too. For our name. She paused, then looked at me fully. Her tone softened, almost maternal. Just remember, Lena. Tomorrow is the day Sabrina restores the family's image. Don't take that from her. The last sentence wasn't a request. It was a command. A reminder of where I stood. What I was worth. I think part of me always knew she'd say something like that, but hearing it in that place after everything, it snapped something in me clean. I nodded slowly, not in agreement, but in understanding. She turned back toward the dinner, heels clicking against the stone path, and left me under the vineyard lights. For a long time I stood there, breathing in the cool air, letting the silence press against me like a second skin. There would be no miracle reconciliation. No whispered apology. No warmth. They didn't want a daughter, they wanted a placeholder. A shape that fit into family portraits but didn't cast a shadow. And if tomorrow was their coronation of Sabrina's new life, I would not be the silent backdrop they walked past. I looked down at my hands. They weren't shaking. For the first time in years, they were steady. Calm. I walked back toward the main house, slowly past the tables of laughing guests, past the floral arch they'd rehearse walking through tomorrow. Inside the guest room, where I'd been put second floor furthest from the bridal suite, I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my laptop. The file sat there untouched since Harold had transferred it. I double-clicked. The video loaded. I let it play once. Then again. Then I closed the lid. The night was dark now. The vineyard outside looked peaceful, unaware. But I wasn't. Not anymore. And neither would they be. The morning of the wedding came cloaked in sunshine and silence. Birds chirped as if nothing was about to implode. I stood in front of the mirror in my hotel room, smoothing the deep navy silk of my dress, my fingers steady, my face unreadable. Not too flashy, not invisible, just enough to be called up. I pinned my hair back low, simple and clean. There would be no tremble in my voice. No rage, just light and sound. The venue was a manicured vineyard estate in Napa Valley, all ivory tablecloths and imported flowers. Rows of white chairs curved around a gazebo draped in pale pink roses. Guests in designer heels and pressed suits sipped champagne under shaded parasols. I walked in alone. Nobody stopped me. That part they had made sure of. Being the sister was still enough for an invite, even if only by blood. I felt the eyes before I saw the stares. A few hushed voices trailed me, probably wondering if Sabrina had really invited me or if I'd just shown up out of spite. But they quickly looked away. That was the role I was cast in for so long, the outlier. The quiet one. The one who could be erased with a shrug. Today they were about to learn something new. The ceremony had already begun. Sabrina stood radiant under the arch, her dress glittering like frost in the afternoon sun. Grant beamed beside her, oozing charm and control. My parents sat in the front row, proud and poised. I stayed in my seat until the ceremony ended and the MC invited everyone to the reception inside the main hall. The reception was as excessive as I imagined. Crystal chandeliers, filet mignon plated like art, a live string quartet playing pop songs with elegance. Every centerpiece looked like it cost more than my college tuition. I didn't eat. I barely sipped my wine. I waited. Waited for that part in every wedding where they pass the mic. Where someone from the family says something sweet and sentimental. And when the MC stood at the center of the dance floor, tapping the mic gently and flashing a rehearsed smile, I knew. We would like to invite the bride's sister to say a few words. The MC's voice echoed through the room. She added, the bride's sister-in-law, Sorry. Lena. A polite smattering of applause. Sabrina looked frozen. She hadn't expected this. Her hands gripped the stem of her wine glass like it was the only thing keeping her upright. I rose slowly. My heels clicked against the marble floor with each step. I reached the mic and smiled. Thank you, everyone. I won't take too long. I just wanted to share a small memory, something that meant a lot to me recently. I nodded to the AV tech near the stage. Just a little video. That's all. The room darkened slightly as the projector screen lowered behind me. The music stopped. The murmurs fell quiet. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the screen lit up. It was a dimly lit video, clearly taken from someone's phone. Grant appeared seated on a leather couch, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand. His tie loosened, his voice thick with drunken confidence. Off-screen, a male voice asked, "So, what's the deal with Sabrina? You locking that down for real?" Grant laughed long and loud. "Sabrina, man, come on. She's a look. A brand. People love the boss babe thing. She gets me indoors with clients who'd never talk to a guy like me. She's a pass. A VIP wristband. Temporary." Then he lifted his glass. "But hell, I'll ride that until it's inconvenient." Dead silence. I turned and looked at Sabrina. Her hand was at her chest. Her lips parted, shaking. One of the groomsmen dropped his fork. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father's face drained of color. And from the groom's side, a man who must have been Grant's uncle stood up fast. "Is this real?" he barked, looking toward Grant. "Tell me this is some kind of sick joke." Grant was on his feet now, stammering. "That's not what it looks like. I was drunk. I didn't mean any of that. I love Sabrina." But the damage was done. Another man, the father of the groom, maybe stood too. "I want a word outside. Now." Sabrina finally turned to me, tears caught on the edge of her lashes. "Lena, what did you do?" I stepped away from the mic. My voice didn't rise. "I didn't cry. I just said I let you show yourself. That's all." More commotion behind me. The screen went black. A bridesmaid tripped as she tried to rush forward, grabbing at the remote. Someone muttered about calling it off. I caught my reflection in the polished glass wall, a flicker of someone unrecognizable. Not angry. Not vindictive. Just still. And as Sabrina sank into a chair, face pale and disbelief washing over her like a tidal wave, I walked quietly back to my seat. No applause. No cheers. Only silence and the distant sound of $1,000 cake being wheeled away before anyone could cut it. The fireworks hadn't even started and the night was already burning. Sabrina came at me like a storm, her heels clicking furiously on the marble floor. I didn't move. I saw her reflection in the tall glass behind the dessert table before I felt her slap. It was sharp, fast, and echoed across the ballroom like a dropped plate. Gasps rippled through the guests still frozen from the video. Someone knocked over a glass of champagne. My cheek stung, but I didn't flinch. I looked her dead in the eye. Her face was contorted not with sadness, not with regret, but with rage. "You're jealous," she hissed. "You've always been jealous. Of me, of my life. You couldn't stand that this day wasn't about you." She raised her hand again, but Grant grabbed her wrist from behind. "Enough," he said flatly. She yanked her hand away and spun around. "Don't you dare defend her," she snapped at him. "She just humiliated me in front of both families." Grant didn't even look at her, he looked at me instead. His eyes weren't angry. They weren't even surprised. They were just blank. He didn't say goodbye, he didn't apologize, he didn't ask any questions. He simply turned and walked out of the ballroom like someone who had just realized he left the stove on at home and couldn't be bothered to return. Sabrina stood frozen, staring after him, her breath hitching in short, confused bursts. The groom's father stepped forward next, straightening his jacket, his face set like concrete. "This wedding is postponed," he announced. "Until further notice. We will not be associating with a family that encourages deception, mockery, or instability." Behind him, the groom's mother nodded once and took off the diamond necklace they had just gifted Sabrina during the engagement exchange. She placed it on the nearest table as though it were now tainted. Then they both walked away, followed by the rest of the groom's side like a slow-moving wave of judgment. Sabrina was left standing in the middle of the room in that overdone white gown with its glittering beads and 15-foot train. No one reached out to comfort her. No one clapped her on the shoulder or whispered, "It'll be okay." The air was too thick with disbelief, the kind that leaves a bad taste in your mouth no matter who you side with. Then came my mother. Her steps were slower, softer, as if walking through water. Her mascara had started to run, though she tried to dab it with a napkin that was already damp. "Lena," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You didn't have to do this. Not like this. You could have come to us. We would have listened." I tilted my head, not out of pity, but curiosity. As if I had stumbled upon an old relic in the attic and was trying to remember where it came from. "You've never listened," I said. "Not once." She grabbed my hand and I let her, but only for a second. She was crying now, really crying. Her body shook the way it had when Grandma died, except this time there was no death. Only revelation. "I just wanted one day to be perfect," she pleaded. "For once." I stepped back. "That was never my job," I said. Behind her I heard my father's voice, low and sharp like a cracked bone. "You've always resented this family," he growled. "You're not one of us. You never were." He was standing near the head table, arms crossed, the veins in his neck pulsing like they used to when I'd come home late as a teenager. "You think this makes you better than us. You think truth makes you a hero." I didn't answer. "You destroyed everything," he said. "All of it. Because you couldn't stand being in her shadow." There was a pause. I could have said 100 things. I could have brought up the years I funded the mortgage when Dad's consulting slowed. I could have reminded him I planned Sabrina's college application essays, bought her first car, even made the down payment on her New York apartment. I could have told him that the only shadows Sabrina ever had were the ones cast by lies she told herself to stay shiny. But I said nothing. Silence was all I had left to give. He waited for me to break, to scream back, to defend myself with tears and gestures and old stories. When I didn't, he clenched his jaw and turned away. "Good," he muttered. "Walk away. just like always. I took one long look at the ballroom, now half-empty petals from centerpieces scattered like confetti on the floor, the projector still faintly glowing with the last frame of the video. And I walked. Not in shame, not in triumph, just forward. Through the corridor lined with candles that now felt unnecessary, past the open bar where a single flute of champagne still fizzed, and out into the cooling air. The night had cracked open, but for the first time in years I could breathe. I left the estate without saying goodbye. No slamming doors, no dramatic exit. Just me walking down the gravel path with the scent of burnt sparklers still clinging to my dress, and the ache of everything finally coming undone, pressing behind my ribs. Mark had already called an Uber, sensing I wouldn't want to linger. We rode in silence, hands intertwined as the lights of Santa Barbara blurred past the car window. My phone vibrated once. Then again. By the time we reached the hotel, there were over a dozen messages. All from Sabrina. The first one read, "I didn't mean to slap you. I just..." Snapped. Then, "Can we talk, just us?" I set the phone down on the nightstand without replying. I didn't have it in me to open that box again. Not tonight. Mark ordered room service. We sat cross-legged on the bed eating pasta out of overpriced takeout containers while he gently undid the zipper of my gown, letting me breathe for real. I took a hot shower, washed the night from my skin, and stood in the mirror wrapped in a towel, staring at the woman looking back. No bruises, no mascara streaks, no cracked voice. Just me, whole. When we got back to Seattle the next evening, the messages had tripled. Some were apologetic. "Mom's in bed. She won't eat. She's crying all the time. You don't have to forgive me, just help me fix this." Some tried guilt. "You ruined the night. Dad's furious. I don't even know if we're still engaged." People are sharing clips of the argument. It's all over TikTok. Then they turned sharper. "Are you seriously just ignoring me? I swear to God, Lena, if you don't take that video down, I'll tell everyone what you're really like." And finally, desperation. "Please. I can't breathe. I can't sleep. Make it stop." The strange thing was, I hadn't posted anything. Someone else at the party had recorded the slap. The screaming. The mother sobbing into her hands. The bride falling apart in heels and makeup under a sky of unused fireworks. The clip was less than 30 seconds, but it was enough. By the end of the week, wedding blogs were dissecting it. Reddit threads with titles like "Bridezilla Breakdown at Coastal Estates" started popping up. People who didn't even know us were debating whether I had been justified. Whether Sabrina was a narcissist, whether money ruins families, or just reveals the rot that was already there. I didn't say a word. Instead, I blocked her number. Then Dad's. Then Mom's. I changed my email. I deleted the shared album link I had once made for family photos. I turned off Instagram notifications and let the storm howl outside my walls. It was quiet in our apartment. Peaceful even. Mark gave me space-cooked breakfast every morning and reminded me I wasn't alone. I started each day reading one page of Grandma Elaine's letter. Just one. Then I folded it back into the silk envelope and tucked it beneath my pillow. On the fourth morning, the line that stuck with me was, "You do not need anyone's permission to heal, my brave girl." On the seventh, it was, "Some people only know how to love control. That is not your failure." And finally, "You don't need to be forgiven to begin." I cried then. But it was the good kind, the kind that rinses you out and leaves you lighter. One afternoon, I walked past the boutique window near Pike Place and stopped cold. In the display was a new dress. Not one of mine, not one of Sabrina's. But the embroidery. The neckline. The way the pleats fell into an asymmetrical train. It looked like mine. The original. The dress I had sketched in the margins of journals before any of this began. The store was called Whisper and Bloom. I walked in. The owner was a woman in her 60s named Jean. She welcomed me warmly like she'd been waiting. I complimented the design and asked casually if she did custom work. She smiled and said yes, but this one was different. It had been inspired by a story she read online. About a woman who stood silent while her family imploded. About the quiet kind of strength that doesn't need to shout to be heard. I didn't say anything. I just knotted my throat tight. She offered me tea. I stayed for an hour. That night, I thought about the irony. The very drama that tried to erase me had birthed something else. A narrative not mine, but echoing through strangers, finding new shapes, new seams. I picked up my phone. Looked at the last message Sabrina had sent before I blocked her. You always think you're better. You only care about yourself. I didn't reply. I deleted it. Then I turned the phone off and stepped outside. It had rained. The air smelled of wet cedar and fresh start. I walked without direction, letting my breath match the rhythm of my steps. At the corner of Pine and 3rd, someone played jazz on a saxophone, and I stood for a moment, letting the notes wrap around me like armor. There would be more noise, surely. More headlines. More family whispers and half-truths passed around the holidays like brittle cookies no one wanted to eat. But I wouldn't be there to taste them. I had unhooked myself from the performance, stepped out of the audience, closed the curtain. For the first time, it didn't feel like running. It felt like arriving. And for once, the silence wasn't empty. It was mine. The morning after I blocked Sabrina, I woke to silence. No new messages. No missed calls. No alerts. Just the soft hum of Seattle rain tapping against the window pane. For the first time in what felt like years, my phone didn't feel like a weapon waiting to go off in my hand. It was quiet, and that quiet felt like peace. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared out at the mist swallowing the city skyline. My inbox had nothing from Mom, nothing from Dad, nothing from Sabrina. The absence of noise wasn't hollow, it was clarifying. I opened a blank email and let my fingers rest above the keys. Not with anger, not with sadness, just with truth. It didn't take me long to type it. I didn't revise it or agonize over the wording like I had with every other message I'd ever sent them. I wrote, "Please don't contact me again. I hold no grudge. But I also no longer belong to the version of family you want to preserve. I am not ashamed of who I am. I am Lena Whitmore. And I have chosen truth over silence." I hovered over the send button for 1 second, maybe 2, then clicked. The message disappeared into the void, and with it any remaining illusion that I owed them more of myself. Later that afternoon, while I was answering emails for my own consulting work, a headline caught my eye on a finance newsletter I still subscribed to out of habit. Fleet Cross Logistics initiates internal audit after public backlash. The article was brief, but the implications weren't. Following a viral clip tied to a high-profile wedding scandal, several investors had pulled out. A strategic shipping deal with a West Coast chain had been suspended. The company had released a bland statement about reevaluating internal standards of leadership. My mother and Sabrina weren't named directly, but the subtext screamed. The fallout had begun. And I felt nothing. No thrill, no vengeance. Just confirmation that truth, once seen, has a way of working quietly. By sunset, I was out on my balcony with a blanket over my legs and my laptop in my lap. The sky had softened to lavender and gray. Seattle's noise was still there, but underneath it all I could hear something steadier. Myself. I opened a blank document. No plan. No outline. Just the white screen staring back at me, full of possibility. I hadn't written anything personal in years. Everything I ever gave had been edited, filtered, acceptable to someone else's expectations. But now I wasn't writing for them. I wasn't writing for anyone. I was just telling a story. Mine. I started with what I knew best. The feeling of being erased. The slow suffocation of being useful but invisible. The ache of having love withheld unless it served a purpose. The moments when I realized silence could be both prison and power. Word by word, I let it go. I wrote the names I once avoided. I wrote the things I was told to forget. I wrote the love I gave that never came back, and the courage it took to stop waiting for it. I didn't write for revenge. I wrote to remember. And in remembering, I reclaimed. When the night fully settled in, I leaned back and let the cool breeze wash over me. The cursor blinked on the last line, waiting for more. But for now, I didn't need to finish the story. The act of beginning was enough. My phone buzzed once. A new message request. Not from anyone I knew. Just a stranger, probably someone who had seen the clip. I didn't open it. Instead, I set the phone down and looked out at the lights blinking in the high-rises across the city. Somewhere my parents were probably still trying to spin the narrative, still trying to find someone to blame. Sabrina might still be waiting for a response, clinging to a version of herself she thought could be salvaged. But I was no longer in their frame. They had spent years crafting a portrait of perfection, and I had been the smudge they tried to erase. But the truth has a way of staining through. It shows up in headlines and whispers in the uncomfortable silences at cocktail parties, and sometimes it shows up in someone quietly walking away, never looking back. Because sometimes justice doesn't need a courtroom. Sometimes it just needs someone brave enough to turn the lights on and then walk out the door. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more true stories that remind us truth has power and silence isn't always peace.